To welcome everyone this evening. I am pleased to present Gary Bowersox. He will share his 50 years of gem-related exploration activities in Afghanistan. He has visited emerald, ruby, aquamarine, kunzite, morganite, tourmaline, lapis lazuli, and other gemstone mines throughout Afghanistan. Today, mostly private families and individuals operate the mines. It's very artisanal, and that's how they make their living. And over the years, various organizations have come together to develop legal gemstone trade from this country, as opposed to things just being smuggled out. Gary is an experienced explorer, an Afghanistan expert, gemologist, entrepreneur, president of the Gem Hunters Corporation, consultant for USAID, DAI and World Bank, and seller of gemstones. He has over 5 decades in the international gem and mineral trade, sourcing gemstone rough in countries throughout the world. He is the author of 2 books, Gemstones of Afghanistan and The Gem Hunter, True Adventures of an American in Afghanistan, and was the subject of a documentary titled The Gem Hunter in Afghanistan, detailing his work in the gem mines of Afghanistan. So please give a warm Washington, D.C. welcome to Mr. Gary Bowersox.
Thank you. This is going to be the cover of my newsletter that's coming out, and you can either Google my name or go to my website, thegemhunter.com, and sign up for our newsletter, or send me an email and I'll be glad to send it to you. But we started over a year ago to do this for USAID, and we had a program whereby any Afghan that wanted to market his goods could show a picture and also his details on his contact information, so that we would promote the Afghan goods directly. We ran into some problems with it, not like we have right now, but because the Afghans, a lot of them didn't speak English or didn't speak good English. But our major problem was in Afghanistan, if any of you have dealt with the Afghans, is they love to quote you a very high price initially, and they expect you to negotiate. But most Americans didn't do that, and it still was a problem. But going on, as you probably have heard, Afghanistan now is pretty well, for me, and working is a dead situation for the next 5 or 6 months. You can't really get in or out. You could possibly get in, but as I said earlier to some people, only purchase a one-way ticket, because you probably won't need one to come back. So anyway, the Taliban have totally taken over Afghanistan at this point in time, except for the mountains of Panjshir, some areas in Nuristan, and some out in the western side of the country. I fully expect that there's going to be some formal, very large battles come next spring. Why is this? As you probably have heard from our own news, Afghanistan just closed down its doors, and no one was prepared for this. Most people will consider it a total sellout by the Afghan government and by the US government, put it frankly. General Bismillah, who was the defense minister of Afghanistan, was a good friend of mine. He was in the last war with the Taliban, working for the Alliance of the North, Ahmad Shah Massoud. He claims that they wouldn't let him set up barriers, and they basically told him not to fight. I can't tell you specifically who told him that or ordered him not to do that, but he currently is up in the mountains in Panjshir with the previous vice president, with several of the other Panjshiris up in the emerald mining area, and it's becoming a very heavy winter there now, so there's not much they can do in the winter. But if you take the Panjshiris, which are of a Tajik tribe, and you add to it the Hazara, are a Shia type of Muslim, and you add to that the Uzbeks, those 3 groups are almost equal as far as the number of people to the Pashtuns. And There may be a few, count them on my fingers, probably if I knew who they were, Taliban that are not Pashtun. So it's a tribal situation. Afghanistan is extremely tribal. There's been very little loyalty throughout their history with the central governments. And this is a major problem in Afghanistan. The other problem is, I say this jokingly, but there's some truth to it, that they say a moderate Afghan only carries a grudge for 8 generations. So this is another problem we have to work with. And most of the Afghan people are not very excited, as the Taliban were not, about not having foreigners in their country. But the Taliban are laying down the red carpet now to the Chinese, and they've already started moving some of their people into Afghanistan. I think their first move was to start to take over Bagram, which was the air base in Kabul, which has 3 nice runways compared to the 1 runway that they have in Kabul. And secondly, it would give them a position to be fortified outside of Kabul. Now, of course, everyone questioned, why did our military leave Bagram and close down when the people they were to protect were still there? So this is what turned into a mess, as you noted on your TV, with people trying to get out of Kabul, and many of them are not out today. Most of my friends, particularly the ones from Panjshir Valley where the emerald mines are hiding out in different houses, and the Taliban is searching for them. And they're killing people, denying it, when they find somebody that's too connected with either Europe or the United States, or particularly worked with Europe or the United States. They can just shoot them for no reason at all. So it's a sad situation right now. But as I said, I think next spring you're going to see some major battles start up. So it's not over yet. So we'll see what happens. This was my 50th year. I went over working for USAID to put a program together in Dubai. We had troubles with COVID, of course. We couldn't find Indian people, Thai people from Thailand, Sri Lanka, or Taiwan, which had cutting operations. But one fortunate thing happened, and that was there had been agreements between Dubai and Israel, so that now the Jewish people could come to Dubai. And we were all excited about this because I've spent several trips to Israel, also for years sold rough emerald to Israel. And my Afghan friends could never go to Israel from the other side. So it was going to be the first time I had friends for 25 or 30 years that could get together and meet. So we had about 25 people all coming to Dubai on the 12th of January to meet. And the Afghan government had cleared over $40 million worth of rough gem materials. It was just rough, no cut stones. And so everyone was excited, but on the 12th of July, we got a notice that Dubai had sent messages to Israel that please stop sending people or giving out visas for now, because we think the COVID is going to increase. So we had to move our meeting till November 2nd, which just passed, and there was no movement to be able to do that now. So it killed our whole program that we had worked almost six months on. But that's the way life goes sometimes. I was the senior advisor for the gemstone industry in Afghanistan, was my title, and it was a USAID 3-year contract, which I did the first year of, and now I've been notified that that is finished for this time. Okay, let me look at my notes here. As far as currently, I talked to an Afghan last night, as a matter of fact, and there is some mining going on in Jagdilik. The Taliban are allowing that. And some of the goods, not too many, or large amounts or large dollar volumes of goods, are being taken to the Pakistan border and are being allowed in and will be shipped from there. But most of the people, including the Afghan that I was talking to, are afraid to do it because you never know who's going to turn against you or confiscate your goods. So at this time, they legally aren't really mining legally, and they can't legally take them across the border and ship them. In the north, many people, including the emerald miners, are hiding out in the mines because they do have some fairly deep tunnels up there at about 13 to 14,000 feet. So some of the people are doing some work there. The only way they could get their emeralds out is to fly them to Tajikistan, because the Taliban have surrounded them in the north. And it's about a 200-mile trip. So till they open up those roads, the only way in and out is by helicopter. So go on to what I've been doing. I started over 50 years ago. I think it was like 53 years ago, bought a jewelry store in Hawaii. Then I went wholesale after 2 years because I got basically tired of working from 9 in the morning till 11 at night, 365 days a year with our store was open. Secondly, I couldn't travel anymore, and I'd traveled since I was in college. 3 days out of college, I bummed my way around the world. So I love to travel and decided to go wholesale. So I started a wholesale business about 35 years ago. And then I started going to Tucson at that time and doing gem shows in stores where I would take up 10 showcases. As a couple of you mentioned, you've seen some of my shows. And that was one day a setup, one day a takedown, about 6 to 8 hours, and 3 days a gem show. And that really kind of got old and took up a lot of time. The jewelers had to empty their showcases. So then I went to roundtables where we would invite 10 couples or say 20 people total, and we'd sit around a table and pass stones around where people could open up the parcel with the data on it and put them on their fingers, and we'd serve some wine in many of the stores, and we really had a good time doing that. But COVID put an end to that. So now what I've been doing since COVID hit is going in, working with jewelers and doing private meetings with private couples or single people. And that seems to be working right now. And that's the only way we have to operate. If anyone's interested, you have a store, let me know. I'd be glad to talk to you about that. As far as I'm concerned, the jewelry business really died right after COVID started. And it seems to be picking up a little bit. But the problem now for the future is I will be at Tucson, but I don't know who else will be there. Last week, I had an email from a Pakistan friend who happens to have his master's in science from the University of California, and they won't give him a visa. He has come to Tucson, I think, 30 years in a row, and always gone back home, so that wasn't a problem. Always had money, so that wasn't a problem. So why they won't give him a visa, neither he or I can figure out why. But I don't know what's going to happen with GJX this year, because I have a feeling that most foreigners aren't going to be able to get visas. So unless the people crossing the border in Mexico are all bringing stones, there may be a shortage of stones there at this time. And I also suspect that because of shipping, not only shipping problems, but shipping costs has gone up, that you're going to see increases in prices of the stones. And of course, cutting's the same way. And right now, for instance, I did a lot of cutting in Sri Lanka. I would take my Afghan goods, because they didn't have cutters, to Sri Lanka and cut my stones there and bring them back. Now it's even a problem getting through Hong Kong, because they want you to declare your goods and what you have. And they're talking about the possibility of putting a tariff on them or a tax, which would create another problem. And that really is a bad link, because I'd always go to Hong Kong on my way to Thailand and Sri Lanka. So I don't know if Singapore is an option or what we're going to do there in the future. So, okay, go on to the next slide, please. This is just some quick pictures That's Ahmad Shah Massoud in the upper left-hand corner, who was the leader of the Alliance of the North. His son now is one of the leaders. As I mentioned, Amrullah Saleh, who was vice president, is in a second or equal position along with General Bismillah and Salih Registani and several of the other key people with Ahmad Shah Massoud before. And also the Uzbeks have had meetings and joined them, as well as the Hazaras, as I mentioned. But as you can see in the lower right, to get to Panjshir, when we used to go from Pakistan, we have to go up over 14, 15,000 foot passes, and it's all by horse or heel and toe express. The military after 9/11, right within 10 days had me come to Washington, bring pictures, bring maps. And the one thing they couldn't believe at first was that their Humvees weren't going to work very well, and especially northeastern Afghanistan. It's totally different than what you see on our TV programs, where most of the fighting in the past has been in the desert areas, south and Herat, those areas which have flatter and desert. It's like the United States. You've got Arizona and West Texas compared to the mountains in Minnesota or Michigan or other places. It's changes a lot. And we got about 13 peaks over 15,000 feet in Afghanistan. So it's quite difficult going back and forth. And there's places still in Afghanistan today that are the same. When I wanted to go from Ishkashim to Shignan up on the border to explore for spinels, I finally got the village people pinned down as to why they wouldn't rent me a horse. And the reason was nobody that rented a horse previously had never come back. So that is the problem with northern Afghanistan. Very few people, lots of high mountains, and not easy to travel, as our military found out. If you want to see more of that situation, which was a very good movie, watch 12 Strong. It talks about General Dostum and what we did, and it was written about the first CIA people and troops to go into Afghanistan after the Taliban. And I think you'll enjoy the movie if you like, especially if you like war movies or anything. A little bit different, not sophisticated with the rockets and the cruise missiles. The lapis mines I hadn't mentioned. Last I knew, there were still some people, local people, operating the lapis mines. Lapis is coming out slowly. Now it's very slowly because of the situation where the Taliban control most of the borders. But, one thing, gemstones always move. No government can stop all the gemstones at any one time. And let's just say if the Taliban did take control of the country, and the other people who could stop it would be the US, Russia, China, other governments. If they all decide this is the best thing they can do, then I think gems will flow again, because any country will want to have exports and have money from exports. So, hey, I'd like to stop for a minute and take some questions. I can't visualize sitting here what you all would like to hear.
I have a question, and that is that you mentioned earlier that you might consider going back to Afghanistan come next May or that time frame. What might do you figure transpire, but that would allow that travel to happen?
Well, it wouldn't be going into Kabul. It'd be going through the back door. I've made like 6 or 7 trips to Tajikistan. I've traveled and explored Tajikistan, but I know I could get into Dushanbe, and that's where my friends, who are the current heads of the Alliance of the North, are now called the Resistance, are placed and living. And if they are mining emeralds, which I'm pretty sure they will, because they will want money, I could work through Tajikistan with my Afghan friends. I don't believe, you're right, that I won't be able to go to Kabul like I did for several years recently. So it'd be going through the back door. But that's the same as when the Taliban were in control, or the Russians before. I had to go through the mountains of Pakistan to get into Afghanistan. That answer your question?
Feels dangerous.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think so.
Well,
And-
there's
and
a fine line between guts and stupidity, I say. And
Yeah.
you're always across the line before you realize it.
But would you be going that, if you go that route, would you be basically primarily looking for emeralds?
Yeah, that's
For
where
that
most of the
region?
emeralds are. Right.
Primarily emerald.
Well,
Okay.
emeralds also, but Akshan now has some sapphires. I've had some purple sapphires, and I also have had spinels on both the Tajikistan and the Afghan side of the border.
Red spinels?
No, mostly pink. Some of
Pink,
them are
okay.
close to red, but not what I would call a true red, right?
Are they large crystal or small crystal?
They cut
Predominantly.
most of the stones that I've been able to cut are up to 12 carats, but
Oh,
most
that's
of the
pretty good.
12 carat ones are on the flat side. They're not.
Okay,
well cut.
okay.
Mhm.
okay,
But nice stones. Mhm.
okay, good.
I also have a ruby. There's a picture of it on my website. Well, I think I'm going to show it here. Let's go on to the next slide.
Okay,
I'll show you some of the pictures of some of the stones that I currently have. This was a 70 carat emerald that I found in Panjshir Valley with some friends, and I took it to Uli Pali in Germany. What you're looking at is a horse head, and the name is Bucephalus because it was carved in the likeness of Alexander the Great's horse, which was very famous. He rode that horse from Greece to India, and it was the only horse known to stand up against the Indian army because the Indian army were riding elephants, not horses. And so they actually named a town in Pakistan after the horse, but it's disappeared now. This is Tajikistan ruby. This mine is up on the border of China. You have to go to Kuilao where the spinel mines are, and then about 200 miles northeast of that area to find this mine. It's a 51 carat ruby. And this is a set of spinels. There you can see a spinel carved by Larry Wynn in the center. But getting nice spinels out of there. Next slide. This is an emerald.
that's
Somebody says, well,
gorgeous.
how good are Afghan emeralds? They tend to be, in many cases, larger than emeralds from Colombia. And in appearance, you can't tell the difference. There's a little different content if you do all the chemistry, however, but not
this
much.
is really, really clean. Usually what I had seen in the past from Afghanistan, they are heavily included. This is gorgeous. This is
No.
absolutely stunningly beautiful, clean. Very nice.
No, we've sold some very nice, expensive
nice.
emeralds. Yeah, but like all mines, you have low
Right.
quality as well as high, and
Absolutely,
not that many high.
absolutely.
By the way, the prices you're looking at are retail. So
Yeah.
this is a
That's
ruby.
gorgeous.
I'll tell you a little bit of a story with this ruby.
Yeah.
This comes from up on the Chinese border. It takes about 25 days to get there after you fly into Dushanbe, and that's partially because of getting permissions, but it's 300 or 400 miles by road. I purchased this piece in the rough at the mine in 1999. I brought it back, and some of you may know Andy Gulick, who was a contest cutter in California. Andy cut it, and I'll tell you, I paid $15,000 for the rough, and then I sold it to some good friends for $23,000. And last June, I ran around the country because my friends had passed away and their children wanted to sell the ruby. So I went around and I met Jeff Post at the Smithsonian. I went and saw Richard Drucker in Chicago and Stewart with the Gem Guide, and basically, and several other people, but we came up basically with a value wholesale of about 140,000 now as a fair value. So you can see what's happened to ruby prices. Now, with the current situation, the ruby mines in Afghanistan are basically closed down with very little production. Tajikistan's not doing much. And I haven't seen the actual papers, but I think it's illegal at this point in time for particularly an American to buy a Burmese ruby. So Burma's got the same problems. And I've seen articles just the last 2 weeks about major fighting being prepared in Burma. So most likely you're going to have difficulty getting Burmese rubies as well, at least any new production. So this was an aquamarine. This is where my wife gets into the picture. She's holding this one. It's 586 carats. It's a cat's eye, just to show you that there are large stones coming out of Afghanistan. This is just some of the lapis projects from Afghanistan. And of course, this has gone on for years. I'm sitting at that table right now. You're welcome to come over and have dinner with us. And so they're making beads and bracelets and jewelry. And we were just really getting that market going with the Afghan designers and manufacturers when this whole program crashed. So they're pretty sad right now. There's chunks of rough lapis for years. Of course, those mines go back over 7,000 years. That's known, where they were found in the lapis was found actually in Mesopotamia and Egypt. The pharaohs would make their scarabs, their business seals with it. Cleopatra was known to use the powder for eyeshadow. Later in history, Michelangelo, many of the European painters powdered it, and ultramarine, and those were the paints that they used for the old paintings in Europe. Some people wanted to cheat a bit and used azurite and other stones, but as the Getty Museum can tell you, many of those paintings, rather than having blue water 50, 100 years later, they've got oxidized water, so it's green because it's oxidized azurite. Actually, about 5 years ago, and I haven't heard the results, I knew they had some, but I went to each lapis mine and gathered samples of lapis and sent it to the Getty Museum, and they were testing their paintings with some real fancy, expensive equipment to see the lapis in those paintings, which photo or which picture painting would match up with that, which was an interesting experiment. I think he said he's going to put this out so you can see it, but you can also go through our website. If you want to see a 52-minute film on a trip to go to the lapis mines and the emerald mines in Panjshir, just go to my website. I can't quite see it on the bottom of my screen, but the link is there, and it's free on YouTube. This is what Panjshir Valley looks like, famous valley. It's totally blocked off in the front side. There's just a river and a road. And what they did trying to stop the Taliban, they blew up both sides of the mountain and closed it down for about 5 days. But then Pakistan sent 2 divisions of troops in with helicopters, airplanes, and drones, and they rebuilt the opening, which in the past, the Taliban, when Massoud would shut down the valley, it was impossible for them to open it back up. So they're not playing fair. Pakistan got involved and totally supported them to take over the center part of the valley. This is the homes that they're living in now, which are not down in the valley in part of the village. These are the ones up in the mining, and you can see where they've done a lot of digging. There's a lot of overburden there. The tunnels are about 50 to 200 feet inside. And of course, that's, thank heavens, they've done this because now they can live there in the winter. 10 years ago, it was impossible to stay up here, not only because of the cold weather. You can see the steepness of the mountain. You can't move around because they would have as much as 7 foot of snow with the glaciers moving down up on the higher levels. On the left-hand side of this screen, you can see the article that I was involved in that was written for GIA, and that's available online as well. In 2009, I was hired by USAID to do a survey of the ruby mines and the emerald mines. So we had about 5 to 6 Americans, and all the rest was an Afghan crew. We went to every single tunnel or hole, did a GPS latitude, longitude, altitude, so we could develop maps on a satellite that they could eventually use to create legal licenses for the Afghans. And we spent 2 months doing this, and a lot of energy and money from USGS, but the government of Afghanistan and the ministry decided they really didn't want to give out licenses at the time, so it was never gone any further. But you can see on this map where circles of plottings of the GPS are, and you can see there's a lot of room in between. So this is our belief that there's many more deposits of emeralds than we've even come up with at this point in time. And of course, we have no idea of how deep the emerald veins do run in the earth. This is a brand new USGS map that's on the web for Panjshir Valley too, that people could study. This is Ruby Mine area in Jagdili, which is southeast of Kabul, only about 3 hours by road. Most of it is pit mining, as you see on the right side, but then some of the mines are very, very deep, as you see here. And the rubies are found in marble. So you have people just sitting all day pounding marble to get their rubies out. A simpler situation, if you're back in the US, is you can take a chunk of marble with a ruby in it and put it in acid, and the next day you'll have your ruby and no marble left. So much simpler, but it's even difficult now to buy acids in the United States. On the left-hand side, you can see a photo of a ruby and sapphire article that was written a few years ago. And that's also on the website if someone wants to study that and read it. Here we go with a map of the ruby mines that we can study. Actually, we had a fellow with us that was a software satellite expert. So he's the one that did all the plotting. And the goal was to be able to plot each mine that we found to put on one sheet of paper where the miners could sign it and have the latitude, longitude, and altitude. So it'd be a very simple contract that the government would publish. This is two other areas in the ruby mines, and you see they're not connected, which most likely there's material between those sites as well. This is in Nuristan. This is one of the toughest areas to go through or to even get into. They've got poison ivy, poison fly bites, which turn into leishmaniasis, and very tough territory to go through. And most of those mines, like the Panjshir emerald mines, are up high. On the left is a picture of the Kamdish district where the tourmaline is being found. Okay, this is another mining area in Peish Valley, there was a lot of fighting during the Americans' time there. And that's where they're finding tourmaline, kunzite, aquamarine, and morganite. Tourmalines are bicolor, tricolor, multicolor, as well as the pinks and the greens. Not many true reds, however. Now, this is the mine that I mentioned has been open for over 7,000 years. Actually, there's about 12 different mines in Upper Badakhshan. This is a Sari Sang area, which is on the road to Tajikistan, which I mentioned earlier. These are some very large tunnels because they actually worked in these tunnels for over 7,000 years. I'm talking hundreds of feet high in most places. And the movie that I mentioned that's on the website, you can actually have a total view going inside those tunnels and see what they're like inside. Okay, this is the book that I published called The Gem Hunter, which is my tales of working in Afghanistan for over, it was 35 years at the time, I believe. And this book that was held up earlier is more of a scientific book showing the mining areas, maps, pictures of the gemstones, and lots of pictures of gems and what we have. And this is a DVD video, which I said you can watch live on our website. Now, we have a lot of bridges to cross, as most people have. And this is one of the bridges that I volunteered to get out of the truck and walk across. You can see why. Now, the real reason for this meeting, as you probably noted, that I've been showing you a lot of stones, but I'm not here to sell you stones today. And books and DVDs, I'm not really here to sell you those. But what I am, if you show the next slide, I'm here to sell you timeshare lots in Afghanistan. I can really give you a good price.
Oh, good.
So come and visit us in Hawaii. We're welcome to have you at the beach with us. And I've made so much money during COVID. It's been unbelievable that we have purchased a brand new penthouse. Well, that's about what I have to say. I'd like questions. I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you so much, Gary. Please,
welcome.
everybody, chime in.
Uh, Okay, Gary, first of all, well, this is Kusam, and I just love the knowledge and your experience. And I mean, we've been in business for 40 plus years, and, and to see this gorgeous, this beauty, natural beauty, I don't have word to express. It is so beautiful, and your experience with all these gems and the mines and first-hand experience and dealing with the local people, I can totally relate to it. But thank you for sharing this. This is a wealth of knowledge and experience of lifetime. It is, there's no price can be put on. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're
Thank
so
you.
welcome, and thank you.
Loved it.
The worst problem that has not been solved is I really have some very, very good friends,
Right?
particularly
Yep.
one group. I worked with the grandfather, then the father, and now
Yep.
the son, and he's got a family, but he's hiding out in different homes
That's
every
right.
night
Yep.
because the Taliban are trying to find him, and we just keep saying prayers that nothing happens to him. So
Absolutely. Yeah, they are going to hunt them. They are going to hunt them. It's a sad, horrific, but it is just, it's very sad. But this is very enriching, and I could totally relate to it. Once you become friend, I mean, overseas, those people are so loyal, and they're friends for life. For life, you can depend upon each other. So thank you so much. It is
You're welcome.
absolutely wonderful.
To add to that, I bet I could name 15 or 20 people that would take a bullet for me. And I don't think I could name one American that would do it. And I honestly would have to admit, I'd have a problem if I had time to think about it, whether I'd give my life for somebody else or not. It's not in our character.
Yeah, I can vouch for it. That is so true. So true. Yeah, that is so true. Yeah.
Someone wanted to know if the State Department or the military has ever consulted with you about Afghanistan.
Both, several times.
There's another question in the chat. Let's see. Does the Taliban have something against the gem trade or gem miners / dealers? And if so, why?
Oh, they just want to make money. If you get my book, The Gem Hunter, the last time the Taliban existed, I actually took the assistant interior minister to the ruby mines because they wanted to crank it up and get production way above what the Afghans were doing. So I was working with the Northern Alliance and the Taliban at that time, and it's in a chapter of my book.
Another question is, are there any specific inclusions within Afghani emeralds and rubies? I'm assuming that the emerald inclusions are probably similar to Colombian.
Correct. Three-phase inclusions.
Three-phase, yeah. And then the rubies do they show fingerprint inclusions and included crystals and that type of thing?
Yeah, so one thing about the Afghan rubies, I had John Emmett, some of you may know, do some studies on trying to heat Afghan rubies, which was brought up in my ruby article. You cannot heat Afghan rubies, and if you have one in a ring, please don't try it, because most of the Afghan rubies, how you can really identify them, will have a little purple spot or dark blue spot in the stone, and that's your titanium. And when you try to heat that, it expands, and you end up with a messy colored ruby. And I've had it happen on several occasions. So the word is out not to try to heat any Afghan ruby. So the good news is they're natural, but if they try to heat them, it's a problem. But it is an identification type of item.
Okay, so they have the little blue, like sapphire type, blue sapphire.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay. As an appraiser, I would just like to say that, the American troop, I would see, so-called rubies that they bought in Afghanistan, and they were always the lead, glass filled, and, not actually rubies. And that was a huge problem. When I was having to tell people that, their 14 karat ruby from Afghanistan, it was, lead glass filled composite.
Welcome to the club. And as you know, there were very few cutters in Afghanistan. These goods were being brought in from India, from other countries, not from Afghanistan, even the ruby part. And yeah, it got all over the world. They were having problems with the people working in Afghanistan, soldiers or whatever, bringing those out. They should have said they were leverite. You leave them right there, but that didn't
Yeah,
happen
yeah.
that way.
Well, I think they saw, American troops and they had dollar signs. They thought, well, we can sell
Right.
sell stuff
Yeah.
to these people. And I would see, they would bring shoe boxes full of really cheap beads and all kinds of stuff. And I'd say, they want to resell it. They want it all of a sudden, they want to be gem dealers. I said, not with this stuff.
Yeah, David Graham and I don't know if you know David Graham, he's another GG and an FGA. But he and I tried to set up on the basis where they would have somebody there just to tell them if it was natural or not, but we never got any place. A lot of the Afghan soldiers or American soldiers in Afghanistan had seen my movie, and I was getting 2 and 3 emails a week. Tell me quickly how to buy stones. And I
Quick.
tell them to get Antoinette's book, whatever. But then I'd say, but immediately note that 90% of what you see is not from Afghanistan, and it's synthetic, it's glass, etc. Be careful. One soldier wrote back about 4 months later and said to me, "Sir, I paid attention to what you said, but you were wrong on the 90%. Everything I bought was 100% synthetic."
I don't have any more questions here. So if anyone, there's plenty of comments thanking you and sharing your experience. And but if anyone else has any more questions, please ask.
Okay, December
Thank you
4th
so,
is my
so
big Christmas party, so come for that.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.